here to present you the video review of the brand new Audience Forte F5 power cord. The cable arrives accompanied by the usual elegant blue box from Audience, where you can see the golden logo together with an ecstatic live audience. And most importantly, you will find some deoxide liquid inside. You will find an accompanying letter by President John McDonnell, and at the sides of the box you will find the length of the cable as well as the model, so you will have a guarantee that it corresponds to your order. As to the visual side, we have to say that the FORTE F5 power cord is larger than its interconnect cousins. We are accustomed to thin interconnect cables by Audience. In this case, with the power cord, we have a normal size, a normal thickness. The cable is black with occasional thin white stripes. Also, the terminations are both white. They are longer than its competitors, and this translates into an easier effort to plug it in or out when there are space constraints at home or in a studio. And it's also very sturdy, so it's a safe cable because you don't have to scotch tape it. You can be tranquil that it won't come out of a wall plug or the back slot of an amp, for instance, all of a sudden. It is actually a piece of audiophile jewelry, in my opinion, because it looks like a real beautiful cable. Some cable manufacturers fail at this because they produce cables that look like exotic snakes, water hoses, or shower tubes. In this case, you can see that Audience AV leaves nothing to chance. One more important aspect is that even if it's a rounded and solid cable, it is also at the same time pretty flexible, and this comes of ease when you have to route it behind your stereo. Sometimes you have a lot of cables and you don't want them to touch one another, and you want to keep them as far away as possible. With this cable you have this opportunity, so I think it's another plus to consider when purchasing a new power cord. Going to the trivia, I'd like to tell you that Audience like to call their power cables power cords with an H between the C and the O, because there's a game on words between a cable and a musical chord, in order to stress out the harmony and the musicality of their cables. A second anecdote is that, did you know that the Audience AU24SX power cord won the 2022 Absolute Sound Editor's Choice Award? Well, I wouldn't be surprised if the FORTE F5 won more awards too. As per the preparation and the initial phases of the tests on my equipment, I have to say that the first thing that I did was that I used this screwdriver, this kind of tester in the wall plug, because the model I received, the model I chose, was 1.75 meter long, and it has a Schuko termination. So I tested it to check out which the best polarity result was. Another thing that I did was to test it in my bi-amp system. So I tested it on my 2 amps, on my subwoofer, on the source, etc. And in the end, I have decided to leave it connected to my power amp because that's where it's staying, that's where it brings the most audible and least subtle results. The genres that I used to listen to during these tests were quite different from each other: rock, metal, ambient, noise, electronica, classical music, and so forth. And I use different kinds of recordings: vintage, recent, bad recordings, good recordings. I tested it with very hard to reproduce material, and I have to say that the impressions that I received from this baby are the following. First, that it delivers a weightier presentation, so the low end improves in that you have rockier and more explosive kick drums, for example. And then the electric guitar is more sculptured, not sharper, but more 3D. In general, everything becomes a bit more 3D. And the attacks and the decays are faster, and the dynamics are another strong point delivered from this cable. Another important aspect is during the quietest passages, for example, spoken words or melodic passages or less crowded passages. This is where you will hear the best results. Audience worked a lot to refine their cables with the geometry and many other aspects. In the end, the result is that there is less grain, less noise floor. Who doesn't want a quieter background? Everybody wants to hear the nuances, everybody wants to get more detail and squeeze one's CD collection or streaming collection and so forth. With this cable you can do it. Of course, remember that so far, nowadays, there doesn't exist a cable which can bring night and day differences. But if you start from a decent quality stereo with sophisticated electronics, you will definitely have a betterment under many key aspects. This is a well-engineered cable which rejects RFI and EMIs, and it's a cable that requires a lot of tests, of course, so synergy reigns supreme. The first thing you have to do is try it on all your machines and see where it delivers the biggest results. In my case, it was the power amp, and this means that if you connect it to a sub or a power amp, you will usually get the biggest results because it is usually where the wattage is higher that you can receive more audible effects. So if you just have one good power cord to replace your stock ones, then start from those electronics. That's just my piece of advice. You also have to consider the value of this cable. Of course, Audience had to reach some kind of compromise to sell this cable at $649 US for 1.5 meters of length. But you can be sure that it was a compromise that was reached, keeping in mind that they wanted to keep their competitors behind. At this price, you get something that has more value than its competitors. You can have a good ratio between price and performance, but of course if you have no budget issues, you can definitely aim at a more expensive non-entry level audience power cable. Unlike the FORTE F5 cables, so far in 2022 there is only one version of this cable with 10 AWG thickness of high purity stranded copper and cross-linked polyethylene dielectric material. But there are three available lengths, 1.5 meters, 1 meter, 0.75 and 2.5 meters. Very comfy when you deal with subwoofers, for instance, placed in corners or quite far from a wall plug. In conclusion, I want to say that I've never met an audience cable that didn't sound good, and I have received and tested many. So any audience cable is an improvement to your stock power cord. Thirdly, audience gives you a warranty for a lifetime, and consider that Wolf Audio uses audience cables on their 9K to 12K streamers, and this is no coincidence. If you still aren't convinced about the quality of this cable, I want to tell you that if you are a lucky owner of a previous version of an audience cable, you don't have to sweat to sell it and buy a new cable, because Audience is one of the few companies that gives you the possibility of an upgrade. You can send it back to them and they will refine it and give it back so as it is updated to the latest technology and geometry and material improvements that they can offer this year. What more do you want? I really don't know. That's all for today. If you like this video review, you can find the complete review on our official website shown below. To the next review!